Hello everybody and welcome to SQL on the Edge. This is my video series where I go through the latest and greatest of the Microsoft data platform. I'm Warner Chavez, SQL Server MCM and MVP, and I work for Pythian. Make sure you visit us at pythian.com. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about Stretch Database. This is a new feature that is now available in the latest CTP for SQL Server 2016, and it will be part of the full release when SQL Server 2016 comes out next year. It's a very interesting feature. It extends the integration between the full SQL Server on the box product and the Azure SQL Database service. So it allows you to take a table inside a full SQL Server version database and extend it into the cloud. So the use case for this is really about helping you manage your archival or your data retention in a more easy way, right? You don't have to worry about provisioning the storage. You don't have to worry about doing maybe some more complex partitioning yourself, but you can just stretch your table into the cloud and it'll be available transparently to the queries that go to the table. So there's no need to do any change in the application. There's no need to do any change in the queries themselves. And because it's all integrated with Azure SQL Database, your data is safe in the cloud. It'll get backed up by Microsoft. It's just like any other type of Azure SQL database. So very interesting stuff. Let's go over the demo. Let's see how it's set up and how it works and how we can query it. Let's check it out. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is the Stretch Database Analyzer that is now part of the SQL Server 2016 Upgrade Advisor. So this is the latest version of the Upgrade Advisor, and actually the Upgrade Advisor has also gotten a facelift that makes it look a lot more modern in this latest release for SQL 2016. So you just select the Stretch Database Analysis. Here we have the scenarios at the top. So we can see there's Stretch Database Advisor right there. Once you point it to your instance and your database, it'll run an analysis and then it'll give you the names of the tables that are candidates for stretching and the ones that might have some issues. So you can see I have this small HR database and I have these 9 tables that were analyzed, and I get the outcome here in the middle panel. And you can see there's one that has a warning, a couple of warnings called the DBO salary table, and I can just click on it and it'll tell me what the issue is. In this case, it says tables referenced by a store procedure in an update or delete statement can be part of a stretch database, but the update or delete may fail. So the reason for that warning is that in the current release of Stretch Database, updating or deleting rows is not supported. Right now, the only operation supported is inserting or selecting data. Okay. Now that might change in the future or not, but at this point it just doesn't work. You can't update or delete records on a stretch database. However, if we're using it for archival purposes, this should not be a big deal anyway. All right. And that's pretty much what the analyzer looks like. Now let's go into Management Studio and check out the experience of enabling and working with Stretch Database. Okay, so I'm connected right now to my SQL Server 2016, this is CTP 2.3, and the first thing we need to do is to enable at the instance level the setting for Stretch Database. Now the setting is called Remote Data Archive, so this is a new setting in SQL 2016. We just need to do a SP configure for it and set it to 1 and reconfigure it, and that's it. So once we have it set up at the instance level, next comes setting it up at the database level. To enable it at the database level, we need to create a credential. This credential is going to connect to Azure SQL Database, and we have to pass in our admin and our password for it. This is the credential that our local SQL server is going to use to connect to the cloud to that particular Azure SQL Database server. Okay. Once this credential is done, then we enable at the database level. This is where we specify set remote data archive and we pass in the server name. So if the credential was already created with this server name and network connectivity works, that credential is fine, then this will go in successfully and it'll create a database in the Azure SQL Database server that will be used to have all the archive stretch database records for this HR database. Okay. Finally, After you're done enabling on all these other levels, you enable it specifically at the table level. This is done with an alter table command. So the setting now is called remote data archive, and then you can set migration state equal on or off depending if you're enabling or disabling the feature. In this case, we set it up with migration state equal on so that it's enabled at this moment. Okay. So I've already run this all as part of the demo. Now let's take a look at what gets created on my Management Studio. This is my local SQL Server. Now I'm going to show you the remote Azure SQL Database. As you can see, there's a database there called RDA, HRE, and a good name. This is the one that was created automatically by SQL Server for my stretch database. And I can even open it up, and you can see there's a table there called Salary Archive and a good, and that's pretty much like the stretch table that was created as part of enabling stretch database for that table. Okay. So once that is all done and setup is complete, there's a couple of different new things here. We have a new DMV that allows us to see the migration status of how rows are being moved from our local SQL Server into Azure SQL Database. So I can just run this query just to show you guys what the results look like. So it gives you a history of all the connections done locally to Azure SQL Database and if there have been any rows moved during those connections. So if I scroll down here, for example, I can see that I previously moved a batch of 4,999 rows and then a small batch of just one leftover row, and so on. There's also a catalog table that can let you look at the remote data archive tables. So we can look at that. And I can see I can find that salary archive table now there registered as well. Now, when I go in and just query the data, I'm going to run this now. We can see I get my 10,000 rows that I have now in the cloud. And also on the execution plan, you guys can see it's a table scan. So this is a local table scan that gets concatenated with a remote query. And this remote query is the one that is pulling down the data from Azure. And then both result sets get put together to give the final result to the user. Now the reason why it's a mix of both is because if we make a really big insert and in the meantime SQL Server is migrating the rows to Azure, then it needs to mix both the local result with the remote result, right? Okay. And then I'll show you guys, like for example, I can insert another 5,000 rows into my archive table. So I'm just going to run this insert. We can see 5,000 rows were inserted as well. And I can select it again. And I get my results back. So I get now 15,000 rows. We can go to the execution plan, and again we can see it's a mix of the table scan and the remote query. And finally, we can also take a look again at the migration status to see if the 5,000 rows that I just inserted have made it to Azure or not at this point. So we can see the results here, and we can look up here. So it doesn't look this. It is a timestamp for 7 minutes ago. So it looks like they have not been migrated yet. But we can just re-execute this, and we can see now it's been migrated. So now it's on the migration of the 5,000 records to Azure SQL Database. Okay. Okay, so I hope you got a good overview of the stretch database feature through the demos. We checked out how to enable it, we checked out how to set it up on a table, how to query it. It's a good experience through Management Studio in the latest preview. It's completely integrated with backup and restore operations. And another interesting part is, like I said, because the Azure SQL Database part is completely independent, then if we want to have some better performance for the data that has been stretched to the cloud, we can scale that part independently. So this is a very interesting feature. I'm sure a lot of our clients are going to find it really, really useful, and I'm looking forward to see how it turns out once the full product gets released. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for our next video.